Imagine being trapped inside your own body, a silent observer to a world that believes you're gone. This is the unimaginable reality Martin Pistorius lived for over a decade. It began with a seemingly ordinary sore throat, a childhood ailment that quickly spiraled into a nightmare. 12-year-old Martin, a bright, curious boy from South Africa, found his life irrevocably altered in the winter of 1988. What his parents initially dismissed as a cold morph into something far more sinister, stealing his voice, his movement, and ultimately his apparent awareness. Doctors offered a devastating prognosis, a degenerative neurological disorder, leaving Martin in a vegetative state. They told his parents, Rodney and Joan Pistorius, that their son was essentially gone, a shell of the boy he once was. But they refused to give up. They brought him home, committed to providing him with the best possible care, clinging to the faintest glimmer of hope. This is a story not of despair, but of extraordinary resilience, the unwavering power of the human spirit, and the profound impact of love and connection. Martin's early years were filled with the simple joys of childhood. He was a tinkerer, fascinated by electronics, always taking things apart and, sometimes, putting them back together. He had a close-knit family, with siblings David and Kim, who filled their home with laughter and the usual sibling squabbles. He loved playing outdoors, exploring the South African landscape, his imagination as vast as the veldt. He dreamed of working with computers, a passion that seemed laughably distant in his current state. The illness began subtly, a persistent sore throat that wouldn't go away. Then came the overwhelming fatigue, making it difficult to concentrate at school. His movements became clumsy, his handwriting deteriorating. Joan and Rodney, increasingly worried, took him from doctor to doctor, seeking answers. Each visit brought more tests, more uncertainty, and a growing sense of dread. The initial diagnosis of flu gave way to suspicions of something far more serious. Finally, the words they feared most were spoken: cryptococcal meningitis, progressing rapidly. The doctors spoke of brain damage, of a life lived without awareness. They used terms like vegetative state, words that seemed to strip Martin of his humanity. Rodney and Joan were heartbroken, but they refused to accept this as the end. They would care for him, love him, and hope for a miracle, no matter how small. They could not just leave him in hospital, they brought him home. The awakening was gradual, terrifyingly so. It wasn't a sudden snap back to consciousness, but a slow, agonizing dawning. At first, it was just fragments of sound, the muffled voices of nurses, the rhythmic beeping of machines. Then came blurry shapes, the distorted outlines of people moving around him. He felt the sensation of being touched, of being fed, of being turned, but he couldn't respond. He was a prisoner in his own body, his mind screaming, but his voice trapped within. He began to understand the conversations around him. He heard the nurses discussing their day, their families, their lives that seemed impossibly distant from his own. He heard his parents' voices, filled with a mixture of love, grief, and a desperate hope that he couldn't reciprocate. He heard their prayers, their whispered words of encouragement, their quiet sobs. He absorbed it all, a silent witness to their pain. One day, he heard a nurse comment that he was just a vegetable. The words cut deep, a stark reminder of his perceived non-existence. The nights were the worst. The darkness amplified his isolation, his inability to communicate, his utter helplessness. It was during one of these long, dark nights that he overheard his father's whispered words to his mother. "I hope he finds peace." The words, spoken with love and a heavy heart, were a devastating blow. Martin felt a surge of fear, of sadness, but also of something else, a fierce determination to live, to somehow break free from this silent prison. He wasn't ready to give up. He clung to that spark of defiance, a tiny flame in the vast darkness. He tried to will his eyes to move, his fingers to twitch, anything to signal his awareness, but his body remained stubbornly unresponsive. Vanaf onder Wald was different. She wasn't just another caregiver going through the motions. She had a warmth, a genuine empathy that radiated from her. She had been working with people with disabilities for years, and she had learned to look beyond the surface to see the person within. She treated Martin with respect, talking to him as if he could understand, even when others dismissed him as unresponsive. One day, while adjusting his position, Verna noticed something. A flicker in his eyes, a subtle shift in his gaze that seemed to follow her movements. It was fleeting, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to spark her curiosity. She mentioned it to the other staff, but they dismissed it as wishful thinking. Verna, however, couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more. She started paying closer attention, observing him for hours, looking for any sign of awareness. She began to ask him simple questions, encouraging him to blink for yes or no. The tests were agonizing, both for Martin and his family. They had been through so much disappointment, so many false hopes. The neurologist ran a series of tests, tracking his eye movements, measuring his brain activity. Martin focused all his energy on responding, on proving that he was still there. The tension in the room was palpable, the silence broken only by the clicking of the equipment. And then it happened. A clear, deliberate blink. A response. The neurologist repeated the test, and again, Martin responded. The realization hit them like a tidal wave. Martin was aware. He was trapped, but he was alive, and he could communicate. The computer was his voice, his lifeline to the outside world. Learning to use it was a monumental challenge. At first, it was just selecting simple icons, answering yes or no questions. The effort was exhausting, both physically and mentally. His muscles were weak, his coordination impaired. But with each small victory, his determination grew. He painstakingly typed out his first words, expressing his gratitude, his fear, his overwhelming relief at being able to communicate again. Physical therapy was grueling. Years of immobility had taken their toll. His muscles had atrophied, his joints were stiff. Every movement was a struggle, every step a victory. He worked tirelessly with his therapists, pushing his body to its limits. He endured the pain, the frustration, the setbacks, fueled by the desire to regain his independence. He celebrated every milestone, no matter how small, the ability to hold a spoon, to sit up unaided, to take a few tentative steps. Reconnecting with the world was both exhilarating and terrifying. His first outing was to a local park. The sights, the sounds, the smells, everything was overwhelming. He felt like a newborn, experiencing the world for the first time. He marveled at the beauty of nature, the simple joy of human interaction. He began to meet people outside his family, forming new friendships, slowly rebuilding his social life. He realized how much he had taken for granted, the everyday experiences that most people considered mundane. The idea of writing a book came to him gradually. He wanted to share his story, to give a voice to those who were trapped in silence, to raise awareness about locked-in syndrome. He wanted to show the world that even in the darkest of circumstances, hope can survive. Writing Ghost Boy was a cathartic experience. It forced him to confront his past, to relive the trauma, but also gave him a sense of purpose, a way to make sense of his experience. He worked tirelessly, typing out his story one letter at a time, pouring his heart and soul onto the page. Meeting Joanna was a turning point in his life. She was a social worker, compassionate, intelligent, and deeply empathetic. They met through a mutual friend, and their connection was immediate. She saw beyond his disability. She saw the man within, the kind, intelligent, resilient soul that had survived so much. They shared a love of learning, a passion for helping others, and a deep respect for each other. Their relationship blossomed, and they eventually married, surrounded by family and friends. It was a celebration of love, of resilience, of the triumph of the human spirit. Today, Martin lives a full and meaningful life. He works as a web designer, using his skills to connect with the world. He is a passionate advocate for people with disabilities, sharing his story and inspiring others to never give up hope. He is a husband, an author, a symbol of strength and resilience. He is grateful for every day, for every breath, for the second chance he has been given. He knows that he is one of the lucky ones, and he is determined to make the most of his life, to live it to the fullest, to honor the gift of awareness that he was so nearly denied. Martin Pistorius' story is a testament to the indomitable human spirit. It is a story of resilience, of hope, of the enduring power of love and connection. It reminds us to appreciate the simple gifts of life, to never take anything for granted. It challenges us to look beyond the surface, to see the person within, to show compassion and understanding to those who may be different. It encourages us to never give up on our dreams, no matter how impossible they may seem. Martin's legacy is one of hope, a beacon of light in the darkness, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable adversity, the human spirit can triumph.